Today, we dive into how to manage your business when you are someone with ADHD. What I realized in the conversation is that even though I'm not diagnosed with ADHD, nor did I ever think that I had it, Alicia was just here to share her story and what it's like for her to be adult diagnosed with ADHD and an entrepreneur. I see some major similarities as a visionary, big picture, ideas all the time, squirrel-brained kind of girl. And so while I don't have a diagnosis of ADHD, this interview really helped open my eyes to how to manage the freedom and flexibility more. Also, because I have squirrel brain and Alicia has ADHD, we got off on other topics which were all so valuable that I just left them in the episode for you. So stick around for more mind-blowing management tips. You're listening to the Badass is the New Black podcast. I'm Krissy Chin, your host, here to teach you how to build an online business that you love and in a way that allows you to work a little bit less so you can enjoy a whole lot more. My hope is that you've showed up to today's episode ready to learn something new and will be inspired to take imperfect action in your business right away. I won't make you wait any longer. Let's dive in. All right, let's welcome Alicia Crossley. She's an author, podcast host, award-winning photographer. Alicia is a collector of stories, capturing their essence and impact with just the right medium. Her goal is to make people feel deeply, question grandly, and grow stronger in the broken places. So powerful.
Did I write that, Krissy? Did I write that?
Either you did or someone else did.
I mean, yeah, right now I'm the only one writing on the team. I was like, wait, see, this is okay. We're going to get into the ADHD, but I was like, that's beautiful. That must have come after a glass of wine. But yeah, let me make sure I've copied and pasted that into my notes for future use, please, on your application form. But thank you for having me.
Oh my gosh, amazing. Whenever I need a bio, I just go search bio in my Google Drive and I have one document. This is here's a little hack for you guys. Exactly. I have one document and it has various bios because for different things, you want to highlight different things, right? And so I'm like, eeny, meeny, miny, mo, which bio should we pick? And I'm always like, oh, that was a good one. Oh, what was I thinking when I wrote that one?
Exactly. I had one that said the only thing thicker than my accent is the vanilla syrup in my latte. And that's true, but it's also so kitschy. And I was like, when did I write that? That's horrible. Alicia,
probably after 2 glasses of wine.
After 2 glasses of wine and before I was medicated for ADHD, probably whenever. Yeah. So, it definitely, as we progress, and we were just talking about that, the focus of our business, as we fine tune that more and more, of course, then our bio has to be updated and adjusted. And it's really cool too, now having the photography business still thriving and then moving into this role more as an author, creating that new facade of the business, that second branch.
Yeah, I love the evolution is inevitable. I think if you want to be successful, it's just going to happen. You're going to grow, you're going to learn more, you're going to evolve. And so either your brand is going to evolve with you or you're going to create these little branches like you did photography. And we'll get into this, your background, photography, and now author and how it's kind of stemming. So I'm excited to hear more about your journey. We had so much fun. I was on your podcast, which is amazing. Imperfectly Polished. Yeah. And we had so much fun. I was like, you have to come on the podcast. And I think I remember that you were like, we talked about my system for the podcast. And you were like, I don't know if we talked about in the episode or just pre or post. And you were like, I really want to experience that, your system.
It was amazing. And I loved it. So the intake form you had, and I still I totally need to copy and repeat. So if you could just also let me know when we get done with this, exactly how you set that up. It was so thought out, so easy to complete. And at the same time, so all the information that I would want to give you, it was all thought out. And then the form too of how to prepare for the podcast, it's so perfect. I was reading through that and I was like, yes, I need this. So I'm totally copying you, Krissy. So that should, I think, make you feel proud since this is your genius, is the systems and intake and all this. So I am learning as I am being interviewed here. So that's good.
It's the exact reason that I created the scalable podcast system and now, shameless plug here, and now sell that system for super, super cheap because everyone has commented on the process. All my guests have commented
Exactly.
on the process.
No, I would
of
totally
doing it.
invest in it. It's worth it because it's your time, it's your product, and it was so clear and wonderfully put together. It flowed. I need that. So yes, I am here. Take my money, please.
I'll hook you up. Okay, but that's not what we're here to talk about.
No.
We're here to talk about you, and we're here to learn more about you. And we're going to want to talk about ADHD, which,
Yeah.
I don't know. Is it like still controversial? Is it like not a popular thing? You were diagnosed as an adult. We'll get into that later.
Yeah,
Let's go
no,
back.
it's great. These are great questions, though. This is like we're
Maybe I
baiting
have
the
it.
audience. This is foreshadowing. So we're like, these are things that are going to come up soon.
Right.
So,
I'm like, or maybe I should be diagnosed. So I'm like, I'm total
maybe
squirrel
so.
brain. I think it's
Oh,
just personality, ADHD. I'm not
And
really
that's a good
sure.
point too, Krissy, when we can definitely talk about that. First of all, and I'm going to go ahead and make sure your audience is aware, I'm a photographer and an author. I am not a doctor. So I'm sharing my experiences with this diagnosis, especially at 36 years old, and how it has revolutionized so much about my business and my personal life. But I'm not a doctor. So, I can't tell you definitely one way or the other, but there's a great distinguishment in between having these elements of ADHD, like experiencing these symptoms, and actually having it. Just like those of us who, maybe get out of breath. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have cardiovascular disease just because you experience that particular system or, symptom of cardiac disease. So it's a great thing to point out. And actually, it's a really cool topic to talk about. So.
Yeah, but even if we're not diagnosed or we're self-diagnosing with squirrel brain, I know that the things that we're going to talk about that you have been able to, manage to be able to manage your business, or like have put in place to be able to manage your business, are going to be helpful for people that aren't technically diagnosed.
Which is a great point too, because just you and I, having businesses and raising families, the struggles that come in with just our natural daily focus, whether you are what we say neurotypical or neurodivergent. I'm divergent. And again, not being medical, don't really know. I just know my brain diverges into other places, I guess. But even that, like you're saying, there's so many crossovers because we're still experiencing the same things. And most of us, even if you don't have ADHD, you struggle with elements of focus and being able to be motivated, of course. And so there's a lot of crossover.
Yeah, right. There's a spectrum. Everything is on a spectrum. So it's like you could be, labeled as outgoing and someone else is too, but they're way more outgoing than you because you're like a little bit less on the scale. So, all the same with that. So let's dive into your background a little bit. I mentioned, award-winning photographer.
Oh my gosh,
so
fancy.
Get fancy, girl. Own it. Podcast host, author. So just kind of take us through that journey just a little bit. So
I'm just going to give you guys bits and pieces because obviously it's a lot of story behind the story, right? But I started off as an English and art major. And I always say I was an overachiever. I got 2 useless degrees. But I loved my major. I loved my classes and had actually intended to do law school. And after an internship, hated it and went on to get my graduate degree in education. So for me, the storytelling aspect was always there with my love for literature and my love for photography. And then teaching others and being able to coach others was a natural part of it too. I've just always enjoyed that. So starting photography was really always in college something I loved. It was never meant to be a career. And I taught for 3 years. And then my husband encouraged me as we started a family to just pursue photography, just have fun with it. And unfortunately, and this is something those with ADHD, now in hindsight, I understand it's very typical, the hyper focus. And it's actually a kind of a super strength of us entrepreneurs who have ADHD, going into something hardcore and hyper focusing on it and learning everything about it. And I did that. And I just dove right into the photography world fully and making it a big career unintentionally. So we've been very fortunate the last 12 years. We have a lovely business now and full-time employees with us. And we shoot weddings all over the world when it's not COVID, whenever we're allowed. And so, but we focus mostly on weddings and the storyline there. And just this past year, I've started the podcast and I'm now writing my first book, working with a writing coach to write a memoir, just based on my childhood and growing up through with parents who've struggled with addiction and my own storyline of coming to a place of forgiveness and being able to see them for who they were rather than what they did. So that's in the making right now. And hopefully we'll have that solidified and out by late 2021.
Oh my gosh, I love it. It's a lot of work to write a book.
Yeah. Holy cow. Yeah. I'm like, oh yeah, I like writing, but kind of like Hemingway, like how he he would write after drinking a glass of wine and say, you write drunk and edit sober. That doesn't really work. And I'm like, Hemingway, you know what? That wasn't really good advice after all. So,
Oh my God.
having to
That's
do it
funny. I
much more
haven't heard
sober.
that. I haven't.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. Right.
But actually, I am very productive when I'm on an airplane headed to vacation, 2 screwdrivers in.
There you go.
With my laptop out, and I'm like, oh yeah, it's just flowing. The words are coming.
I feel like after a glass of wine, I get very lyrical, which is good. It's not so great. And I think if Hemingway was here in the day of social media, it would be horrific, because I can just imagine him, posting on Instagram and Twitter at every thought. The good thing for us is we have people who are like, no, Alicia, stay off of Instagram. You've had a glass of wine. Go write in your notebook. Go write in your notebook.
Well, that's the thing. Then I go back, right? He said, right. Wasted. No, not wasted, but edit sober.
Tipsy. That's a better connotation. Right. Tipsy, edit sober. Yeah. Anything is good like that.
When I go back and look, I'm like, oh, that was kind of ballsy of me to say that. Like, would I feel comfortable leaving that in? But it is kind of like my more true, like unfiltered, right? We're unfiltered.
Exactly. That's the unpolished part that sometimes needs to come out. And I think it does give us that liquid courage to let those guards down and let those pieces come out. And honestly, the different captions and things that I have posted in the past when I've been a little encouraged by a cab or a nice glass of rosé have been my most popular post. It resonates with people, because there's so much truth there whenever we let our guards down.
Confessions behind the microphone. Well, it is true because, we're not so scared of judgment in that moment with that liquid courage.
We should do a series called Confessions and Cocktails and invite people on to have a cocktail with us and see what happens.
Yes. Yeah, it would be very entertaining, right? But it would get a lot of attention because we'd be saying the truth and people would resonate. Exactly. And we wouldn't be so scared. We might cringe after the fact when we go re-listen.
We have an excuse. We had a cocktail. Sorry, we were drinking.
Oh my God. I love it. I love it. So I love this unknowing then that you used your strength of ADHD, which you didn't know that you had ADHD, correct? When you got hyper-focused in photography, but I love that you reference it now as your superpower and you aren't using it as an excuse, a crutch, hindrance to what you're doing.
Yeah, I think that's the great thing. As an entrepreneur in general, we all have our zone of genius and we have our weaknesses, which, that's what you are so great at, looking at the systems and how outsourcing and getting the things off our plate that we're not really being efficient with, and then focusing on what we're great at. Right. And so that's true for everyone. And I think that that's really, understanding now how my brain works has been such a valuable process, because I'm understanding not just the things I'm interested in, but how I work best and how I work differently, and why I have not succeeded with certain systems and certain time management methods before. Ironically enough, I'm married to a project manager. He's like cream de la cream of systems and time management. And I've been like the worst student over our 17 years of marriage, because he's like, just do this, just do this. And the thing is, understanding how my brain works now, there's so many different elements of why certain things won't work for someone who's neurotypical versus neurodivergent. And like you said, personality wise, we all experience that. But, the more you dive into those weaknesses and strengths, you can really become proud of that genius and understand how to get better at the weaker side.
Okay. You mentioned these 2 scientific terms.
Yeah.
Neurodivergent. And what was the other one?
Neurotypical.
Typical. Yeah. Okay. Without, you already said you're not a doctor, so I don't expect and I went to nursing school, and to be honest, I don't really.
Well, you're further ahead than me. I'm only hyper focused on ADHD and only enough that I can understand to talk about it on a podcast. So,
okay. So, but can you tell us what the difference is between those 2?
So just as you mentioned, right, there's a spectrum, and, with anything that we look at from a diagnosis like that, whether you have the diagnosis or not, there's that spectrum. But I guess the medical field, whoever it was who came up with the terms, I don't know the fella or the girl or what year it was made, but those who have ADHD or any diagnosis that's comparable to that are considered neurodivergent. Okay, the brain works differently; it holds thoughts differently. There's a huge list of neurodivergent symptoms, not symptoms, but characteristics. And we don't all have all of them, and some have some of them. And then those who are neurotypical may also have some of those characteristics. But neurotypical basically means you're not living with a diagnosis like ADHD or Asperger's or autism. And even though we all have very unique brains, the medical field would say that that is a neurotypical brain because you're not living with that diagnosis and the unique thinking patterns that come with that.
Okay. And you've mentioned hyper focused. And, when people just think of ADHD, I'm sure they picture this, child or, now adult diagnoses are becoming more popular, but who like can't focus on anything. Right. Like they're all over the place. So that's like the stereotypical thought of it. But hyper focused really means, like you said, you got really hyper focused in that one thing, photography. So is that whole, like, I can't focus on anything, not really the accurate picture?
Different types of ADHD. Some people are inattentive, some are hyper attentive. And then there's combined, and I'm combined, which means I get to experience both. And so sometimes I am attentive and very focused. And it also makes sense, Krissy, especially for women. I'm 36 years old. And if you were born before 1990, chances are, if you're a woman, you were not even considered a candidate for ADHD. And the reason why is, honestly, if you look back at medical books in the first few years that it was being researched, women weren't included in the studies. It wasn't thought that girls could have ADHD. Typically, girls are better because we're more cognitively advanced and we're able to mask the symptoms. Okay. We can hyper focus and do well academically. And therefore, we're not noticed as someone who may need help because of the ADHD. It's usually considered a characteristic trait, a character trait, like you're chatty or you're a daydreamer if you're a girl, right? Like first, second grade, not ADHD, where the boys who are like climbing on the ceilings and, and so it's becoming more, there's more awareness. And that's my main thing with talking about it, is helping those who are in this 30, 40, 50 age range understand what it is, and that you don't just suddenly get it at 30, 40, 50. You've always had it, but why it's never surfaced as a problem until potentially now. And for women, the facts show that 2 to 1 boys are diagnosed up until like 18 years old compared to girls. So 2 to 1. And by the time you get to the 30 age range, it's almost even in diagnosis. So it's not that we didn't have it. It's just that it wasn't apparent.
Wow. So fascinating.
Yeah.
Guys, we're going to learn a lot.
Yeah. So as you were asking about the hyperfocus and the inattentive, I am medicated, and not everyone chooses to medicate with prescription medication, just like with any other diagnosis, right? For me, I do really well. Writing helps me. I have a Peloton, and, I get outside of my body, but I do take Vyvanse, and I take an afternoon tablet of Adderall. And so this is month 7 of being diagnosed. And this has been, it's a constant balance of trying to figure out what medications work for you. It's very, very specific, but these have been working best for me. And so it's given me the ability, instead of hyper focusing on something like shoes while I'm online shopping for 4 hours to find the perfect pair, and then all of a sudden I've wasted 4 hours. I have more awareness and more ability to execute. It's called the executive function. So as an entrepreneur, we all want to be the executive, right? We want to have that ability to implement authority and to command our business in the way we want it to go. And those of us with ADHD struggle with executive function. And that ultimately means making decisions, being able to see time. Time blindness is a real thing. Being able to feel it pass instinctively. And so the way that has helped me in the last 7 months, I've learned about it and have chose the medication that's helped me the best. I have become such a stronger, I wouldn't be writing the book right now. I would not be balancing both the photography business, which is very full time, and creating this brand of writing more, like it's so intentionally. It's given me the ability to do that for sure.
So before diagnosis, before medication, before that, what were some of the big struggles that you had in your business?
So definitely, first and foremost, and I think this is important for anyone who, as an entrepreneur, we have to recognize what we are struggling with, right? You have to self-assess and what is it that I'm not great at? And I always knew, I mean, I was always the friend who, the joke, Alicia's going to be late. She's going to forget her keys. Her phone's probably in the refrigerator. And again, that can be a personality type. That doesn't mean you have ADHD, but that was always true for me. And I was a great student. I was top in my class. And probably in hindsight, growing up in such a dysfunctional family, going to school and getting that affirmation was my lifeline. It was more about surviving. So that crocodile element of my brain was thriving on doing well at school. And if you think of it too, Krissy, back in elementary school and even through college, we had someone directing us saying, do this next, do this next, do this next. I know this now. I am able very, very strongly to complete tasks and a list and timelines, to meet those if they are set for me. So I have to have these systems in place that give me that external awareness of time and motivation, where before, I lived in a swamp of sticky notes and alarms on my phone and trying to remember, and just always feeling defeated. I was actually diagnosed with anxiety right after we had our second little one, and definitely experience anxiety, but that can also just be a symptom of ADHD. A byproduct of it because of that overwhelm and knowing you're forgetting stuff and knowing that you're dropping the balls, that anxiety becomes crippling. And that is also a very common diagnosis for females, adult females, instead of ADHD at first. A lot of us who find out later on that we have ADHD were first diagnosed with depression or anxiety.
Interesting. So interesting.
I know, right?
Okay, so you mentioned you thrive with, like, you could do, if someone was giving you step by step, you could do that. And you were like, great.
Yeah.
In entrepreneurship, no one's handing you a checklist.
Exactly. So you know what you have to have if you are a squirrel brain fanatic. First of all, I realized I'm a better visionary and CEO of my business, right? Entrepreneurs, most people who have ADHD, I forget the percentage, but we tend to grow and lean towards entrepreneurship because we are able to create our own schedules, even though that may not seem like an existent schedule. We're able to live under our own timeline and not answer necessarily to these ins and outs of what you have to do. In hindsight, looking back at my academic years, I've performed very well, but I was extremely anxious. I was always just, a ball of anxiety, afraid I would forget something. So I could do it and I still can do it. But if that is the 100% guise I'm living under, I'm going to be miserable. I need flexibility. I need to be the one who's implementing the vision. We're typically more prone to take risk, to dream bigger, for whatever reason. And the impulsivity is both a gift and a problem, because that's one thing that I definitely struggled with. I struggled with binge eating during my 20s and 30s and I had gastric sleeve done 4 years ago and lost 125 pounds. And, that impulsivity, though, now in hindsight is bittersweet, honestly, back, because like that, would I have needed that surgery? Would binge eating, would that have been part of my story? But I think living in that mindset of what if, and could it have been different, is just, we got to get out of that. I couldn't stay in that too long after the diagnosis. You grieve it momentarily, and then you have to have gratitude that now, and you can move forward. So, but I have an amazing, she's my managing director, and she's the one with all of our systems who trains our team. And it's very important to me that I know and understand how they work, but I also do not have to be in them day in and day out. And I'm not the one who is making them work. So I may come up with, hey guys, I think it'd be a great idea for us to have a questionnaire right when the couple sends in the inquiry. Now you go do that, and then we respect each other in our line of genius, in our zone of genius, because that's what Anna does for me. And then Kelsey works with us too. So yeah, for me, having we use ClickUp, and I know we're going to talk about that, but they assign the tasks that are absolutely things that I have to do. They assign them to me. So that may sound opposite for someone who is like the CEO and in charge of your business, but it lets me spend more time working on the book, and I'm not spending the time making every little piece get done. They only assign to me what I have to do, they can't do. And then I have a schedule that, okay, this is realistic. I can, hammer these things out, and then I don't even worry about the rest of it. I check in on them when I need to, but they're just amazing. Like, they're amazing. And that's what it's about, I think, is getting the right team, the right systems. Like, they're my human systems,
Yeah, I feel like you're telling my story.
Good.
Because that's exactly how, kind of how it works in my brand of business. I'm the visionary. I have the ideas, and I did have to figure out how to implement and how to do it in the beginning. And now that I've hired, a support team and someone who came in initially as a content writer, she was going to be writing content for us. And then she realized, it's not really my strong suit, but she had these gifts and these qualities of a green personality, very analytical, very organized, willing to dive in there, learn how to do it, and get this, system process. And so, very quickly, just she kind of kept leveling up in our support team. And now she is really, our project manager in a sense for the Grow Workspace brand. And I wish that I could steal her for my personal brand. I have to find another unicorn.
I know. Anna's definitely maxed out with our photography side of things. And that was part of the plan, though, was building that up. And she also shoots for us, and she's an amazing photographer. So the personal side, she's not being pulled too much into it. But right now I have a writing coach, and she's assigning me the needed external deadlines. And
right.
I'll probably always work with some kind of editor or writing coach for that reason.
Yeah. But same scenario with the ClickUp. We were using Monday.com for our task management, and now we're using ClickUp, and the team really loves it, but it's the same. They assign me a task, they tag me, I get the notification, and I'm getting better at following through.
I'll finally get a text from Anna, and it's like, have you even looked at ClickUp today? And I'm like, no. And so she had, we have a protocol. Right when I come into the office, I'm supposed to, hit ClickUp, go in, check that out. I know what I'm supposed to do. But that's just that squirrel brain sometimes. And sometimes it's for the good. As the visionary and as the owner of the business, there are days where I'm like, look, that's not the priority right now. I know that there are tasks on that, but we have 2 clients that we're meeting with to book their weddings. And, I've got to turn in these 5,000 words. This is what I'm focused on. It may be 11 o'clock tonight, but I'll get what I need done, So having that authority is very empowering for me. And over the course, I think it's probably more with experience and just age, I feel the empowerment of, my own decisions, and no longer constantly looking for that affirmation that I needed growing up. And that I think a lot of times we need as entrepreneurs to feel like we're doing the right thing in our business, knowing yourself. There was a quote, I think I posted it recently, but it was, one of the memes, and it's like, we seek outside answers, and we, look for people to tell us what we should do, because for some reason we think that someone else knows better than we do about what we should do in our business, in our lives. And there are experts, there are people who have a zone of genius you don't, and identifying that's one thing, but not relying on yourself to be the person behind your business, not having that confidence is crippling. And I think so many people lose their business in the end to self-doubt.
Yeah. Why do you think that is, that people, because I do see that, and it seems very evident and popular now that people believe that someone else knows best. And I believe I know best for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I think honestly, Krissy, if we look at, the power of social media and just having everyone's opinion and voice around us now, there's, Patrick and I, my husband, we just recorded a podcast, and the episode was about the guilty if you do, guilty if you don't as a mother. And it's a great commercial that Carrie Underwood did for Kalia, the brand she has with Dick's Sporting Goods. But it's a really empowering message. But that one line's in there, and it stuck out to me because I thought, why are we guilty if we do and guilty if we don't? But it's that same thing. It's because there's so much out there from a media standpoint, from a social media standpoint for moms about, should you breastfeed? Should you not? Should you work? Should you not? Should you, and we're constantly, well, did I make the right decision? Is this the right decision? Because there's someone so sure that this is the right decision. And you know what? For them, it is. And that's the thing. It doesn't have to be a tribe mentality. It's a me mentality when it comes to making those decisions. So I think there's it's a good dance to get to, a good rhythm of learning when to seek out the opinions of others, and when you know that it's something you're not the best at, compared to constantly seeking that out because you're just so terrified to make a decision. You just have to get in there and mess up. You got it. That's why the imperfectly polished, like, that's why it's called that. Like, you can still be successful and polished and have a trail of mistakes and errors behind you, and even that you're stepping in the moment. And I think to be a successful business owner, failure is not only is it an option, it is necessary. There was a book when I was in grad school, they made us read about failure is not an option, about like the kids, going through, and luckily for us, in grad school too, our professors were like, no, failure is not only is it an option, it is necessary. We need to experience this. Our children need to experience this. And I think that's, so many of us fear failure that we're looking for the outside validation and, fear. And then you just have a brand that looks like everybody else's brand and sounds like everyone else, and you don't stand out.
Yeah. This whole concept of failure, when I was working with my mindset coach, we talked about the definition of failure and how people are so scared to fail, because for them, they have this definition about failure and what it means and what that means for them and their business. And so we changed the definition of failure for my brain. And basically what you do to like kind of manipulate your mind, because it doesn't really know truth from not, is you create this definition that basically you're never going to experience. Exactly. So for me, failure is when I haven't reached a goal and didn't learn something. Well, the reality is I learn something every time I don't reach a goal, which is, quote, failure. Yeah. And so for me, mentally, I never feel failure in a way that will impact me in a negative way, because it's just a part of the process.
I love that. And I love that, retraining our brain, in those ways, because it's that narrative that we tell ourselves every day. That's the other saying, right? That you talk to yourself more than anyone else. Make sure what you're saying is kind and worthwhile. And that internal narrative that we're telling ourselves. And I think that you're absolutely correct with people looking at failure as such a impactful, almost end to means. And it's not. It's, really it's the beauty and the flaws that help shape us in such a unique way. And I recently had a huge proposal I sent out to a client, their designer. And for a few days, we went back and forth. It was great. There was no questions about the budget, actually, which was, what I was like, kind of held my breath when I sent this proposal out. But they decided to go with someone they had used before, just because it was familiar. And Patrick, he was so awesome about it. He said, look, 12 years ago, you wouldn't have even you would not have even been able to fathom sending out a quote of that size, right? Like you would have, no one would have taken you seriously to send that out. That was done. We've done it. Like we've sent out that quote. It was serious. We didn't get it, but that's okay. Like celebrating those wins within the losses. I'm all about finding a reason to celebrate. And I think it's that level of being able to look at that narrative honestly, not recreating it, but looking for the positive elements in it that keep those of us in entrepreneurship there long term,
Yeah. And being able to, and so what do you feel like you kind of learned from that scenario of like putting this, maybe the biggest,
one of the biggest things out there. And I actually, when I got the response, Krissy, I expected, if it was a no, I expected to feel much more defeated. And it's funny enough, this is what this episode is this week for mine. It's a short one-person episode celebrating the wins and the losses. And I don't even know what day it is, but anyways. So
it'll be out by now.
Go look for by now, because we're now in the future. It's already out, so you guys can listen to it. But ultimately, Patrick said the fact their yes or their no did not change the value or the opportunity that you knew you had beforehand. Their yes or no did not have anything to do with the value or the worth I have. because if they had said yes, I wouldn't have thought twice and looked back and questioned anything, right? And I know why they said no, which I think is really important too, owning a business. When you are told no, when you don't get the deal, ask. Like, I have a lot of students that I coach, and especially in the photography world, and they're like, I don't know, I just feel so weird to be like, why? And I say, no, you need to learn why. Is it pricing? Is it that they didn't, is it style? Because there's a lot of confidence there when we understand that the client wasn't our ideal client and why they didn't choose us. If they didn't choose you because they didn't feel connected, they didn't feel like you cared, that's something you need to know. What is it then in your process that seems flippant or like these are things. And every time I've asked, I've always had great, honest answers. And for the most part, for us, it's been budget, because we are definitely, at this point, with the team we have and with what we offer, it's more expanded. But we're also very, very much marketed towards that person. So we rarely have a problem now where it's like, we're very, very much talking to our ideal client through our website at this point. But I definitely learned, though, I think, with that, to have that confidence in myself, despite the answer from the client, from the vendor, from the person I'm asking to be on my podcast, the person I'm pitching potentially, eventually, the proposal for the book to, no matter what they say, I still know my worth. And it hasn't changed because of their no or their yes. I can't depend on their yes to fulfill me. My yes, my decision, my decisions within this business have to be what I feel strong about and that fulfill me.
I love that. This topic has taken a turn.
I'm sorry. Hi,
no,
brain.
Don't be sorry.
It's almost time for my afternoon medicine. So maybe I should go ahead and take it.
We're going to take a quick commercial break here. No, totally kidding. No, this is amazing. We're casual on the podcast. I like to have conversation. Sometimes we follow, guidelines. Sometimes we don't. Yeah. And we just go, whatever's feeling heavy on our hearts.
The right things are said and brought up for the person in the audience right now who needs to hear it.
100%. 100%.
So whatever we get into, it's because there's value there that needs to be given to your audience in some way we may not have identified before.
No, absolutely. I'm just trying to think like, oh my gosh, what am I going to say in my little intro clip? We talked about so many amazing things. What am I going to highlight?
She has ADHD and she shared 5,000 different topics with us, and somehow they connected, but it was, not what we expected at the very beginning.
Perfect. So. I'm just going to clip that part and we'll put that at the beginning. No, I'm totally kidding.
That's great.
I want to cover, that was all amazing. I don't want to discredit any of that. I loved where that took. I loved where it went. I was getting some amazing nuggets out of that. I want to go back to just some tips because you said, I don't know if this was before we were talking or when we were in the actually recording, but you mentioned that different processes, some processes haven't worked for you because of ADHD and now other ones do. So I'd love for you to just shed a little bit of light on either what didn't work and what you're using now that works.
Well, the thing that's unique, and just like we've talked about the spectrum and with everyone, it's just like if you, if you do have diabetes, there's different kinds of diabetes. And even with that, you don't necessarily react the way the other person does. So again, I'm sharing my experiences because there are some people who have no trouble at all with executive function who have ADHD. So if you're listening to this and thinking, well, I don't have any trouble like implementing tasks or staying on schedule, but I do struggle with X, Y, and Z. That's something to be aware of if you are considering that, oh, this does sound like me, so if it's just that one thing is out there and it's like, well, no, I don't have that. It's not like you don't have to have all of these. So for me, time blindness has always been a big struggle. And when I say time blindness, I even laughed when I first read it because I was like, that's not true. That's not a real thing, but it literally is. It's no different than color blindness. You can't see certain colors if you're colorblind. And time blindness is the inability to feel the passing of time and to understand, not necessarily on paper how long something takes, but to be able to gauge it before an activity, either underestimating or overestimating. Okay. And so there was like a meme or a TikTok, and it was a woman who has ADHD. And her husband tells her, okay, we got to leave the house in 7 minutes. And she says, great time. I've got enough time to paint the exterior and get a shower, to paint the house and get a shower. And that's been me for my whole entire marriage. And poor Patrick is the one who is like always on time, such an implementer. And it used to make me mad because I was never, I thought he was always harping on me like a child. So looking at the systems and the things that I've learned from the time standpoint, I now am more receptive to it because I realize, okay, one, that is not my strong suit. And whenever it comes to like in ClickUp, putting in how much time a task takes, I now take the time. And that's one of the aspects of ClickUp I really like because it has made me focus on I've timed myself, Krissy, like how long it takes for me to walk down the basement stairs to get my things together, put them in the car and drive to the office where I'd be like, oh, I live 10 minutes from my office, right? Well, 22 minutes later, I'm at the office, right? Because I've got to get my Topo Chico together. I need to get, I can't find my shoes. And so doing this kind of time trial and then putting that into ClickUp, I schedule now everything. Whenever I have important meetings throughout the day, I'm going to put that getting ready preparation in ClickUp. Like that's going to go on there because otherwise I don't realize that time's passing and I lose it. So other systems before that have just been like, or even to-do list, here's the things I need to do. I've always overestimated how much I could get done. I've always overestimated or underestimated how long a task would take. And what that did was set me up for failure because I'd end the day and look at my list of 3-4 measly things checked off and see the other 25 and be like, I can't believe I didn't get more done. And the fact was, I was always setting myself up for failure because of the time blindness. And now that I'm aware of it, I'm more practical and I'm more realistic with what can be achieved in a day because I'm becoming more studious about how much time each thing takes. And ClickUp has been a huge help for that compared to just my normal Post-it note world I was living in prior.
Yeah. So that makes me think of the scalable podcast system. When you're doing it, I'm going to tell you, I show up to my interviews like 5 minutes before because I just look at the notes that the virtual assistant prepared for me on the system, whatever. But for you, it might not take 5 minutes and that's okay. But you will be focusing on, okay, figuring out how much time does it take me to really get in my zone for my podcast and whatever. Yeah. And so I think the important part here is not just that like, hey, I get to show up 5 minutes before, although that's a great selling point because people want to save time with this, but it's that you can figure out what the system is. So it's super effective and efficient for you. Exactly. So once you figure out, okay, my process is actually not 5 minutes, just like Krissy, it's going to be 15 minutes. Yes. You can then schedule that and just have a more polished system and process to follow. So 100%. Super important for people out there to not get discouraged about, gosh, it takes me twice as long. It's that ability to recognize it and understand it and then put that into action. Such a valuable tip there.
And it's great too in that because it's, the anxiety I spoke about and how that was the initial diagnosis 20 years ago or however long, also not great with math, that the not being places on time has always given me such great anxiety. I don't want to be late. I respect other people's time. I have 3 kids and 2 brands and, I think like 4 animals in this house. There could be more, but like we have a lot going on too. I respect other people's time. I really do. But it was literally like saying, I respect the beautiful colors in the world, but I just can't see blue. Like I can't see it. I'm sorry. But I'm getting better because of these systems that I've put in place and because of being aware of it. And so it's then lessening the anxiety because putting these systems in place has given me that margin I needed to not always feel like my pants were on fire and running around like a chicken with my head cut off, so.
Okay. So be honest, when we were messaging earlier before this episode and we were like, not sure if we were going to record because of weather and connection and all of that. And I was like, well, we could just do it right now.
I actually
45
love
minutes.
that.
Did you freak out? Okay.
No, so for me too, and that's again, one of the things, my personality type, I'm definitely more of a like easy, go with the flow. And I love last minute things, spontaneity. I love adventure. And, not that this is like a grand adventure by recording the podcast early, but you know what I mean? Those kinds of things never throw me off because, I've always been good. I actually went to school on a full paid golf scholarship. I don't know if we've talked about this.
No.
Undergrad and grad school. I don't play golf. And the actual application said a woman interested in the game of golf. I was interested. I would play with Patrick. We were dating and we would go for 9 holes, but I was never good, Krissy. And I was honest about that. But I interviewed well. And I am always, I've always been able to talk through and get people's attention. Again, almost as a survival technique, growing up like I did, because I realized people pay attention when I'm able to read into them and see what it is they're looking for. It's a very authentic side of me, but I can link that part into them where we connect. So for me, talking, especially, like we could have never even met, and you could have been like, hey, can you get on in 5 minutes? Be like, let's go for it. So yeah, that's totally fine. I love that.
I love it. And I will commend you. You did really well on I'll be ready in 20 minutes. And you were pretty spot on.
I said actually 2 timers. I set a 10-minute warning and then I set a 2-minute warning. So I was trying to get all my stuff together. Yeah.
I love it. You did amazing. I would have had no idea that you were what is it? Time blindness.
Because normally, you know what I almost typed? I said, can you give me 10 minutes? And I deleted it. And I said 20 because I was finishing eating and I was grabbing water and I knew I needed to get my setup ready. And I thought immediately, no, Alicia, that's not enough time. But it's because I'm practicing this now and implementing, the actual time things take. So
yeah. And even if you don't have time blindness, I think sometimes everyone wants things right away and everyone wants to please people. And so if it's like, can we do it right now? Initially be like, oh my God, okay, 10. Yeah, but like 10 minutes, I don't want to make her wait too long. She wants to do it right now. And so, regardless of time blindness or not, probably of the indication of you're going to err on the side of less time. I always do that because I don't want to like, I just left, don't want to tell them that you left 10 minutes late. So I'll be there in 15 and then it's 25 because I felt bad. Like I should have just been honest.
And that's the thing. I'll be there in 25. Those realistic expectations. And I think that's true for every business owner. We set ourselves up for failure. And I don't mean the failure, like learn a lesson, good failure. I mean, like fall on your face because you're going to be 20 minutes late. Because you simply did not set realistic expectations with yourself and the person you're working with. And the more that we can prepare ourselves and prepare the people we're working with, the better the outcome and the better the success. So, when I almost topped 10 minutes, I thought, no, that's not going to happen. And then I'm going to be stressed sitting down to this and have anxiety. So I deleted it. I was like 20 minutes. 20 minutes is definitely what I need to throw some blush on. I knew it was video and grab my stuff and get up there and get the ham and cheese out of my teeth and all that jazz. So, becoming more realistic with those little things really has a big impact.
Love it. I love it. This is totally we'll digress back.
I know, but I love it about ADHD and systems. So I hope that.
No, I love it when you just said, I knew it was going to be on video. That's because I tell you guys 15 times in the process, every single point I say, and we'll be on video and we'll be on camera because I repurpose the content. I want to make sure you guys are prepared. So I love that you totally called that out of
your process for this is very ADHD friendly. Maybe that should be one of
yours. Maybe because I am. Maybe I am.
I mean, in the very least, Krissy, and again, because I'm not here to diagnose you or the audience, but in the very least, you have tendencies that you empathize with when it comes to ADHD, right? And so you are trying to make it a luxurious experience for your guests who come on. And luxury, that's one thing too, that word, I know a lot of people that's connected to a certain, monetary element, but really luxury is comfort. And being able to provide a luxurious experience as a podcast hostess is being able to provide that comfort. And it was such a comfortable experience and definitely prepped me and helped me to minimize the anxiety. So maybe how it's you need to have a little star. It's ADHD friendly, gender equality friendly, all the friendly, your ADHD friendly podcast. So
yes, love it. I get the stamp. Amazing. I love it. Well, this has been awesome. Are there any other little tips and tricks that you want to give?
I'm just going to leave everyone with a few things. And again, whether you have ADHD or not, a few of the other systems tricks that I've learned that have really helped me. If you're someone who struggles with either hyperfocus or getting motivated, again, having the inattentive and the hyper, there are some days where I really struggle with the focus compared to others. But one thing I really have learned during the day is focusing on that morning, very practical list. Okay. Creating that realistic list. And then I create a list of want tos. And these want tos are the things that used to get me away from doing the things I needed to, like research a place for spring break for the family, go online and buy a new pair of nude heels, like things that I would like to do and kind of need to, but don't have to do. So I call these my want tos. And so I have a running list of want tos and I reward myself. This is another big thing with those of us who are neurodivergent. We respond really well to external motivation. So I create my own. So if I, okay, Alicia, if you complete this task in the time period that you have estimated, or if you get these 2 things done before noon, then there's 30 minutes to do some want tos, and I build in want to time, and I pick out something from my want to list, and I feel very motivated. I feel rewarded, and it helps me stay on track while also getting to enjoy. I say Nancy Drewing. I love researching. And so I get to spend those 30 minutes researching, a place for spring break and really enjoy that process. But that's one of my biggest hacks that I've learned to keep me from getting off track.
Love that. Love that. So awesome.
And the other thing I'll say, and I'll leave this is very tangible, but clocks and timers, and, learn how long things take you. Start time. If you're someone who struggles with getting places on time or finishing things when you say you will, get little timers off of Amazon, set them, see how long it's taking you, use your iPhone, whatever. For me, having actual clocks, and there is studies that show not just digital clocks, but true clocks where you can see the passing of time. I now have those everywhere in our house. We look like we're like the Mad Hatter or something. And so, but it's
clock collectors.
Yeah. It's because I can see the passing of time, and I'm aware then when I look up, I mean, literally it would feel like it's 5 minutes and it's been 40, and it's like, what? But it's making me more aware of how that time is passing.
All right. So get your want list together, have clocks everywhere,
timers,
set the timers,
that's right.
Set realistic expectations for how long it's going to take you on things. And use some tools like ClickUp, even if your team is the one that's setting it up, like Alicia and I, the team sets it up. I literally, my sister and I have another project that we're working on, and it's like this 14-day training. And so I went into ClickUp and I was like, oh, I'm going to play around with this. I'm going to set a goal and then these little tasks to complete. Okay. And so I was like, day 1, email and copywritten, day 1, video training created. And then as I'm like going through I got through 3 days and I was like, well, this is taking forever.
This is taking forever. Why am I doing this?
This is a waste of my time. I could be doing something else.
But that's a great point too, Krissy. So many of these programs and apps, you can get lost in the planning rather than the doing. And that's something else I've learned, is not to hyper focus on the research and the planning, but get your butt in gear. I was going to say another word, but I also read the actual sheet that got me prepared that said, don't use profanity if all possible, even though we're profanity friendly. So I said, but there you go. But that's one thing too, is like just to get it in gear and not spend too much time planning. Planning is good, but we sometimes use that as an excuse to not do.
Yeah. And I was debating, like, should I pass this off to someone else, like a virtual assistant to like set this up? And I was like, no, I don't really need. It's not even something that's needed, but I don't really need all of these.
Look at that. That was a great experience. And you learned, okay, yes, this is not something I have to go through and make so perfect in order to do what I want to do.
Right. And I figured out how to set a goal in ClickUp.
Exactly. Yes, you did it. I was going to say, but the one part of ClickUp I use often for my visionary side is, and this is one thing too, being more visual. And this is a common ADHD thing, is the mind maps that are in there. And it's kind of like, if you think back to Venn diagrams and that kind of thing in school, it's not quite that cheesy, but you ultimately, like, I have a topic, say trauma, for the podcast. I then can have spinning off from that, and it's like a visual list that shows me. So I've got my circle of trauma, and then I've got 4 other topics, okay, that are connected to that. And underneath it, I can have either topics or ideas for guests for those. And so these mind bubbles then for my podcast, that's how I plan out potential ideas for the podcast, is creating that mind map. And that's really helpful for me because then I have a visual of it and what I've, worked on and gotten some good research for, and then what I haven't.
Okay, I have not seen that. And maybe it's because
it's not like a main feature. And I'm like, why is this? I mean, you can change anything from a list to a board or a mind map. that's actually, and so you may have seen it and be like, what the crap is a mind map?
So you type it out in designated spots and then you say mind map and it will like graphically put it in there. Ooh, cool.
Way. Vice versa, you could do it as a mind map and then it'll show it to you in a board or a list. And that's what works for me for my team, because I like having this kind of like, drawing board. And then they're able then to get a list from it of the tasks that need to be done. So that's one thing I really like about ClickUp is how user friendly it is, depending on your learning style and your style of planning tasks and getting things done. Is you've got the virtual element there that your team is able to connect. Everyone can see it how they want to. I may do better seeing it as a mind map. Kelsey may do better seeing it as a list. Anna may like to see the projects as a board. It gives a lot of flexibility for team members to, be able to get in and do their best with how they learn best.
Mm-hmm. So cool. So if you guys aren't using some kind of task, what do you even call those categories? It's like a task management platform, right? So
others, and this is by far my favorite so far for my brain anyways.
I've worked with contractors that have used Asana, and I couldn't get it. I couldn't get it. I'm sorry. I couldn't get it.
I just never felt connected to Asana. Like it was just, it wasn't confusing, but it was just a little bit, I don't know. I always reverted back to just my handwritten list. And I actually use it.
My brain just didn't follow the way that it was doing it. It's so interesting to watch how my sister organizes things and then versus how I organize, or what I always used to think like, oh, I don't have like for websites. Remember this websites, when they put their little logo in the corner, I'd text Claire and be like, how do I get back to the main page? She's like, oh my gosh, like seriously? She's like, click on the logo. And I'm like, why would I click on the logo?
That doesn't make sense.
She's like, because that will take you back to home. And I'm like, that makes no sense. Why can't there just be someone that says like home or back or whatever? Like, how am I supposed to know that little picture?
I think that is a navigational issue on a website. I mean, that is, if you're unclear, and I try not to be like the one, I try to be helpful, and I'm probably too helpful, right? I'm giving the help that like I give more help than people need, but I would absolutely email that business right then and say, hey, I just wanted you to know I was on your website, love your services, say some awesome things. But it was confusing for me from a navigation standpoint. I couldn't figure out how to get back to the home page, and there's not a navigational like direction to get back home or, back to the beginning.
Right.
It's good for us as business owners to help each other with that.
Totally. However, what I have learned is that's like a common thing.
Everybody.
Okay. On your website, does your little...
I definitely have a home. I don't know if the logo does it, because I'm like, if I was on a website and there wasn't a button that said home, I would be lost. I would have to call
All right.
someone.
Well, you better also link up your logo for the people that are like not paying attention to home.
I didn't know that was a thing.
That's like a thing. So now if I can't figure out how to get back to where I want to go, I just click the logo in the top left corner, and every time it takes me home, I'm like, oh my gosh, who knew?
I feel like you just told me about like the bread trail crumb, like to get back. So thank you. I now know that I can use that. And they're probably like this old lady who's messaging me to have a home button. Does she not know to press the logo? So now I'll stop doing it. So thank you for that. Thanks.
You're like, ClickUp, cancel email to go out.
JK.
Complaining about navigation. Oh my God. Well, this has been amazing. You mentioned your memoir just a little bit. So I'm excited for people to continue to follow you. My mother grew up in, an addictive family. And so while I wasn't firsthand, the things that she's gone through and dealt with and learned about herself and family and whatnot, I know that your book is going to be so powerful for people that resonates with. So please, guys, go follow Alicia. Make sure you stay connected with her so you can read her book or pass it off to a friend who could find value in that. And I'm sure there's going to be more books to come.
Yeah, I've already got 2 more that I've got research notes going for. So I think I've always known Krissy. I've spent almost 13 years telling the stories of others, and lovingly so. I still love, my medium of photography, but it's finally time to tell my story. And it's been through the healing and therapy and all the things that I've learned. And, I'm sure with you experiencing with your mom and anyone out there who's experienced that, or, it's definitely a process, and it's come full circle. So I'm very excited, and I appreciate your support and everyone's support. It's going to be based in the South where I'm from, and, very much a piece of Southern literature that hopefully will resonate with those that need it.
Awesome. So how can everyone find you, stay connected to you?
Absolutely.
They can listen to your podcast in the meantime.
Yeah, if they like squirrel brain conversation, they definitely need to come to the podcast. I think I'm better staying on topic as a host than a guest because I feel a little bit more liberated as a guest. I'm like, I'm just here for the good time. No, I'm kidding. I did prepare. I hope I sound prepared. But my podcast is Imperfectly Polished. And again, it's the idea of showing up, both beautiful and broken and as a whole person and not having to hide behind that mask that a lot of times social media makes us feel like we need to in order to be accepted or to be successful. So it's a lot of stories of, from anything of like ADHD and trauma to systems and time management and, really focused on helping those who are balancing everything else, the multiple roles. So that's Imperfectly Polished. We're on Instagram. And if you're interested in, being a guest or have questions about that show, definitely DM me. We're working right now on the website. Actually, we think it'll be up by the time this is live. So that'll be aliciacrossley.com and that'll house everything, the podcast, the author page, opportunities for speaking engagements, media kit, all of that. So aliciacrossley.com is speaking it into the future because this is the future is now up, and Alicia Crossley Photography is the photography page. If you're getting ready to have an awesome wedding and you need a photographer, we've got you there. So
yes, I love it. And we'll have all of those links in the show notes. So guys, don't feel like you have to remember that. Go to the show notes, click on the links, connect with Alicia. This has been amazing. Fantastic. Thanks
awesome,
for
Krissy.
jumping on with me on video.
I loved it. Yeah. I love your energy and your show is one of my favorite ones. I was so honored to have you as a guest. So thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, guys, we'll see you later. Bye. Until next time, remember, done is better than perfect, my friend, and to channel your inner badass and take imperfect action every single day.